Pulled up beside him, blaring beside Merle, and he said there's still some good in this world.
Hello and welcome to Telling It Like It Is, UGA Extension and Southeast District's newest source for local, unbiased, research-based information about Georgia's #1 industry, agriculture. As always, I'm your host, Blake Carter, Effingham County Ag and Natural Resources Agent. Normally, I would have Savannah with me, and again, this is another one of those episodes where we're having to break off and do two separate recordings. So I'm going to kind of take the lead on it, and Savannah's going to have a really good segment about a little bit on vegetable gardens, and then follow up with a fantastic speaker with some really relevant information about our forestry industry and what's going on with some of the issues with fires in our area and things like that. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do, I do have a new segment coming to you as we're getting into the spring. My phone and Savannah's phones have been blowing off the hook about lawn care and backyard gardens. And so Savannah's going to tackle the backyard garden for a little bit and talk about a little bit on the variety side. But I want to focus on turfgrass. And this new segment is going to be called Green and Growing. All right. So if you'll just take a minute and put on your lawn care hats for me, we're going to talk about how we can make sure our lawns are coming into the spring and are healthy throughout the summer, and make sure they look good and green so we can outdo our neighbors. And that's usually what we want to do. Or satisfy the HOAs if we live in a subdivision, or them gosh darn HOAs. They'll get you every time. So we want to make sure that we are perfect in our lawn care routine, and that way we don't have to run into any issues. So I'm only going to focus on two grasses that I felt are the most common that I deal with, and most of us have in our yards, whether we want it or not, minus the bahia grass that was used on the side of the road. I know we all can attest to our yards might be a little mix of bahia and either Bermuda or centipede. If you've got zoysia and St. Augustine, unfortunately this segment's not for you. But I will touch a little bit on diseases that could be in those. But for the most part, I'm only going to talk about centipede and Bermuda. If you have St. Augustine and zoysia, we do have lawn calendars online you can access. If you go to UGA Extension, you type in centipede, zoysia, Bermuda, or St. Augustine lawn calendars, they will pull up. And it's a really good resource to kind of walk you through when the best time to do different things for your turf is. Now, before we get into the thick of it, I do want to say one thing about centipede. I'm going to refer to it sometimes as lazy man grass. That does not mean that if you have centipede, that you are a lazy man or a lazy woman. It's just a really easier grass to maintain than some of the other ones. It's not as labor intensive for maintenance. You don't have to keep up with it as much. The inputs aren't as high. That being said, it is a light green color. I want to repeat that, light green. So if you want a dark green grass in your yard, centipede is not going to be for you. And if you get it dark green, then you will kill your centipede. And we'll talk through that in just a second. But for Bermuda, I do want to kind of highlight a few things. So spring through summer is your sweet spot for the best looking Bermuda you can get in your lawn. And fertilization for us, if you look at the lawn calendar, it's going to say May, right? This year, I would agree with that because we've had a cooler spring. Now we get into some of the other years where we've had a hot spring. Sometimes you can get away with it a little earlier, but I don't like to risk it. So I always say by the book May. But really, another rule of thumb you can go by is 65 degrees soil temp at 4 inches deep. All right, that's going to be where most of our root systems for our grasses are going to be at. So we want that to be about 65 degrees on average, and that's consistently. So if you get a few 4 days in a row of 65 degrees and you see the forecast not being any kind of flash freezes, you have a good chance of being okay if you went out there and fertilized. What we're talking about when we say fertilizing in this time period, we're talking about adding nitrogen. So we can fertilize in the wintertime too, and I would definitely recommend that for potassium. But when we talk about nitrogen, we want to really hit that sweet spot of wait until it's warm enough. So that feeds into my big take-home message, number one of the day. For this segment, and that is, if you have ever used a weed and feed, or if you currently use a weed and feed, I'm going to tell you, Blake Carter says, do not use weed and feeds. All right, and I'll tell you why. Weed and feeds do good in some parts of our country. All right, I'm not going to deny that. Obviously, if they're selling it, there is scientific evidence that says it should work at some point in time. Now, for us, I'd argue it doesn't do it. All right, and I'll tell you why. For our grasses, a weed and feed is going to have a minimal amount of nitrogen, but it's got nitrogen in it. All right, it's going to have a little bit of fertilizer. It's going to have nitrogen. All right, and it's going to have a pre-emerge. So if you look at any of these lawn calendars, you're going to see that we recommend pre-emerge at one point in the year, and we recommend fertilizing at a different time of year, a few months later. So if that's the case, if you put out nitrogen, what nitrogen does for a plant, if you don't know, is it kind of stimulates it. It helps with the growth, right? That's the easiest way to think about it. So what happens when you get woken up in the bedtime, your alarm goes off early, right? You're not happy. You're going to get up, you're going to throw your phone across the room, you're going to growl a little bit like a bear coming out of hibernation, and it's not going to be a good day. Guess what? Same thing happens with turfgrass. If you make turfgrass mad, what it's going to do is it's going to show up. All right, what that means is your nice, pretty green up in the spring is going to be delayed. You could have dieback, especially centipede, or Bermuda, but your grass is not going to be strong. It's not going to flourish. That also gives an opportunity for weeds to come out, right, and overtake where that grass is kind of struggling. You can have some issues. Okay, so that's why we don't recommend weed and feeds, because that little bit of nitrogen can wake up that grass too early, and it's just the wrong time of year to do both. If it's too good to be true, sometimes it is, right? So we want to separate those two things. Definitely get your pre-emerge, get with your local county agent if you have questions about your grass and what pre-emerge you use. And also think about getting a soil test. That'll help us decide when we should fertilize, how much we should fertilize. Not really when, but how much. It does tell us a little bit more on the pH level too. I'm really speaking for Bermuda, and in some counties, believe it or not, Glenn County, shout out to Mary Claire, MC down there in Glenn/McIntosh. When I was down there teaching for a Master Gardener class just a few weeks ago, I learned their average pH is 7.0 or higher, which is bonkers for me. In our county, obviously we're on a lower pH scale. I mean, I've seen it down to 4.2. I'd say our average is probably in that 5 range somewhere. And so what that means for this is we need to add some lime if we're going to use Bermuda, if we're going to use St. Augustine or Zoysia. Now you can get away with a little bit on the Zoysia side, but mainly you want to get that up to about a 6.0 for the other ones. Centipede and Bahia, you can get by with 5.5 or around that 5 to 5.5 range, and that's perfect. Centipede, I like to shoot for that 5.5 at the most, just so we can get a little bit of a margin of error, is the way I would put it. So when we're thinking about fertilization, there's some other thoughts that go along with it. Centipede is very particular, and it's a little bit more pickier. I say a little more pickier. That ain't right. It's a little pickier. All right. This grass likes lower fertility, so it doesn't like a lot of nitrogen. It really only needs 1 to 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year. Okay, that's not a lot. The way that we do it, that we recommend doing it, especially in our sandier soils, is I like to take it and split it into 3 applications. Sometimes people get away with 2, and that's fine too, but I like 3. And the reason I like 3 applications, divide it into 3s, is because of the amount of rain that we get all at once during the summer times, and typically with our sandy soils, we leach a lot, right? So we want to make sure that we're getting enough fertility throughout the season. So around May is when I'd like to start, and I would do another one at the end of June, and again at the end of July and the beginning of August. I do not like going into mid-August or September, even though technically you could probably get away with it. But on record, I want to tell you, I would not do that. By the book, we recommend going to about August 1st. Like first week in August is probably the latest I'd get away. I'd want you to put out fertilizer. Really, in any of these grasses, not just centipede, but any of the grasses, you would want to split them into 3s, especially with our sandier soils. If you're in a heavier soil type, obviously it's going to change a little bit. You probably wouldn't need to split it into 3s. You can just do 2s, once in the up front around May, and then again towards the end of the growing season in July. But here's another big take home. This is the second take home. If you're keeping track, there's 2. Here's the second one. both grasses I'm talking about, centipede and Bermuda, okay, need about 1 inch of water per week. Per week, okay? Per week. That does not mean we need to go out there and water 1 inch every 3 days. That is not what we need to do. Centipede does respond to wet feet a little bit more, so that means it's going to show. It's going to have some dieback or some issues with the centipede, especially if it sits in water for a long period of time. One rule of thumb to think about is if we have a lot of rain and you're still going out there and watering, a plant really can only survive about 30 hours with its roots saturated and sitting in water. All right, so we don't want to have that again. All right, we had it during the hurricane, the past 2 storms that we had in the fall, and let me tell you, we're seeing it in our turf grass right now. People are calling, asking why it's dying, and a lot of that had to do with during that time period. They're notorious. Centipede is notorious for showing its colors later. So usually the season after, you're going to start to see some issues, and it's usually because of the season before. Now, the other thought here is mowing. I do want to make sure that we talk about that a little bit. Mowing height should be adjusted throughout the season. So usually we want a higher mowing height in the heat of the summer. So during the spring, going into May, even into early June, you can get away with a little bit of a lower cut. But as we get into the hot heat of the summer, into July and August, you want to kind of keep that mowing height a little bit more, so a little bit higher, 3 or 4 inches. I just think it really does help reduce that stress, and you also want to make sure that you're cleaning off your blades if you have any kind of weeds in the yard. That's going to help you out a lot as well. Now, the final thing I want to just touch on before I turn it over to Savannah to kind of talk through some vegetables is diseases. Okay, turf disease is something that I'm seeing, we see it every year, and it's usually when you're not really paying attention. Next thing you know, you look out there and it's a big giant brown spot. Okay, so there's several different diseases that we can see. But the main thing I want to make sure that you're aware of is you've got to spot this early and you've got to treat it right. If you have a history of disease in your yard, it's good to have a disease program or a fungicide program that you've already kind of decided and kind of mapped out what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. And that way you're constantly going to have the best chance to not have that kind of fungal issue happen again. With all the rain, the humidity, and then the severe rain to severe drought that we have during the hot summer times, we're going to have issues. I mean, it's just going to happen. But before you can identify what's going on out there and spot it early, you also need to know what turf grass. So make sure you know what you have in your yard. If you have a plethora of things, like most of us have some bahia on accident, or if you have an old country house on some land that your grandpappy had, it's probably got all kinds of stuff between crabgrass and centipede and Bermuda and bahia, and I mean, it's going to have a little bit of everything and probably a lot of weeds too. So make sure you're just aware of what you have out there. So some of the most frequent ones that we see is the number one I think I see all the time. Savannah might have a little bit different story, but for me, it's large patch or brown patch. Okay, large patch shows up on warm season turf, and that's going to be your centipede and Bermuda, and that's usually going to be in your spring and your fall windows. And I promise you, it happens because I get calls about it all the time. You're going to have big circular patches, and it's going to have almost an orangey tint to the edges. But it does. It's called Rhizoctonia. So if you really want to get into science and you want to look that up, you can Google that and see what comes up. But large patch is one of the most common. The other one is kind of the cool season cousin to large patch. That's brown patch. This often shows up fall through spring, so this is your fall time, and trust me, I see this as well. You'll see rings or patches, and they'll have a smoke ring border, almost like a darker grayish color. Both of these diseases, though, do thrive in wet, humid conditions, so water earlier in the day and reduce shade and thatch. And that's very, very important. Time of day for watering is also super, super important for this and for disease prevention in general. You don't want to, you get into the science of it. When you start watering in the heat of the day, you're not going to get enough actually taken up by the plant because you'll have evapotranspiration. But if you wait too late in the day, it's going to sit there and not dry off, right? So think about getting out the shower and not having a towel. You're not going, I mean, it's not fun, right? You're kind of like, ugh, this is gross. Well, that's the same concept for grass. You don't want to water too late when it gets to not enough sunlight because it's not going to dry. Now, the other one I want to mention that's super duper big for around here is take all root rot. This one hits Bermuda and centipede pretty heavily. It loves wet and high pH soils. Often those above 6.5 are really what we're looking at. So it's not as big in Effingham, but it is something we do see sometimes. The symptoms usually include thinning, dark roots, and patches seem to fade out of nowhere. Usually we're going to see this mostly in your Bermudas, but it can happen in centipede as well. The other thing centipede has is called centipede decline, and it's similar. It's when centipede gets too stimulated in one way or another, whether that's too much water and it's sitting there and it's declining, or it could be natural if it's a certain age on the yard. Sometimes yards naturally decline, or it could be fertility. And finally, the big one is that as for fertility, when I'm talking about that, I'm talking low fertility, but there's also the other end of the spectrum where it's too much nitrogen. So if it's too much nitrogen, you will also end up having centipede decline. Gray leaf spot is another disease, and I just want to put a plug. I told you I would for one of the other grasses. St. Augustine does get this a lot. You'll see gray to tan lesions with dark margins. This is often during our hot, rainy periods. And usually a lot of nitrogen's used. So think about that when you're kind of in that late June, July window. Just be very cautious of that. One way to kind of help with that is to ease up on nitrogen output and then also improve airflow through aeration or dethatching or something like that. So, final pieces here before I shoot it over to Savannah. Weed and feeds are bad. Make sure you're not overwatering, and do not fertilize centipede to get dark green, because if it does, you'll see it for a little while and then it just crashes. All right, so I'm going to shoot it over to Savannah. She's going to talk a little bit about vegetables, and then she's also going to introduce our guest speaker for this episode.
Hey guys, it's Savannah. We were together at the last episode, Blake and I, and we've got so much going on. We're actually separate again today. That being said, you guys heard from him about some lawn care, and I'm not going to get into a lot because we have a really good speaker coming up from the Georgia Forestry Commission. But that being said, I do want to just put a plug in for you guys that are going to be planting gardens. Getting ready. It's almost time. I still would hold off a little bit in regard to putting them in the soil, just because there is some chance for some colder weather. But one of the things I do want to point out for you real quick is the importance of variety selection for those. So each year I get a question, why are my tomatoes dying, or why are my squash dying, and things like that. I really want to emphasize the importance of finding varieties that are disease resistant, or maybe even have some insect resistance to them. UGA does have a lot of great publications that have recommended varieties for your area and which ones are going to have those disease resistance. And those that are not disease resistant that you may want to plant because it's nostalgic or that's what you grow up with, those are fine, but we should know what those are and are not resistant to, so that we can make strives to prevent those plants from dying. So even if you're a small producer or you just have a real small garden, we certainly don't want you to put a whole lot of money into it and then those plants die because of whatever disease or insect that you may have. So just want to emphasize making sure that you do your research, talk with your county agent about varieties that are going to be beneficial to you and in your garden, or whether that's a container garden or whether that's in the ground. That being said, we're going to transition and hear from our speaker. Today I have a guest from the Georgia Forestry Commission, and you might as well say my brother-in-law. I have the Region 4 manager for Georgia Forestry, Gabe Outlaw, with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about burning and some of the things going on with the Forestry Commission. One thing, in Emmanuel County, we've had several what we would consider wildfires recently. Our Forestry Commission actually had to leave an event not long ago to go and work pretty diligently to get some of these fires out. So Gabe, can you explain the term prescribed burning and what the importance of that is for us?
Yeah, so thank y'all for having me today. And as Savannah said, we've been pretty busy. That's no small feat for anybody, especially landowners, since the hurricane. But prescribed burning is a lot of folks get that confused with controlled burning, wildfires, etc. But prescribed burning is a very important management tool that managers use, landowners use to implement a fire on the landscape under controlled or desired weather factors, specifically temperature, wind, seasonality. The objective that's the most important thing really when thinking about a prescribed burn is why are you burning? Could be wildlife, it could be site prep, could be understory fuel reduction, hazard reduction, growing season versus dormant season for different understory vegetation desires. So really just doing it under circumstances in which you have a little bit more control, looking for that good burn day. But weather, being weather dependent, is really the primary thing landowners need to look for and find the day that best fits their objectives. And that's something we help with statewide at the county level. So my advice is if you're looking at doing that, contact your local forestry office that you can find at gatre.org.
So you mentioned that prescribed burning and controlled burning are not quite as interchangeable as we maybe we use it. So what is the biggest difference between a prescribed burn and a controlled burn?
So they're often used interchangeably, but when you're talking about wildfire, a lot of people hear control time. The fire is controlled. So really, the word controlled is primarily used when I'm talking about a wildfire, which is drastically different than a prescribed burn. So to put it a little more professionally, prescribed burning. That term to be used versus controlled burns or controlled fires.
Gotcha. So, you mentioned that a lot of people were trying to clean up from the hurricane, and a lot of times when people are cleaning clear cuts and things like that, they'll burn trash piles and stuff. So, what should people that are trying to clean up from the hurricane or burning down, burning off down trees or limbs and trash, what should they know or do to ensure their safety, the area, and maybe trying to mitigate some of the potential wildfires that have been happening?
Again, really weather. 2-3 weeks ago, we had one of the busiest wildfire weekends in a long time. The busiest day since I believe 2011 statewide, and but really just be mindful of the weather. It seems like we're either too dry or too wet. And thankfully, recently we've had some rain, but really just consult professionals, whether that be us or consulting forester, your neighbor who's done it a lot. But before you strike a match, really just gather information and plan. This storm debris that we're seeing fires that that 1 to 2 acres that we could generally control fairly quickly, assuming there's no down debris. We're seeing we're having to give fires more room to work just because it's simply harder to get in there and put a fire break in areas where there's a lot of down debris. So get a burn permit, talk to your local units, look at the weather. Really just stay up to date, but find the information from somebody, whatever you're looking for. somebody has that information. It just may be a little bit of due diligence on your part to find it.
Good. So you mentioned burn permits. What are the regulations that are in place in regard to maybe burning trash piles or clear cuts or down timber and stuff? What all do you have to have legally to be able to do that?
So, anything to get a burn permit, it has to be natural vegetation. It can't be anything that's man made. Cannot be legally burned in the state. To get a burn permit, call your local office, but they look at where you're burning is the biggest thing, especially if you're doing acres, site prep, fields, anything that's a sizable amount. Just say like 100 acres. The biggest thing is going to be weather, and these days we can control the fire, but what we look at is smoke. How's that smoke going to impact highways, communities, cities, special events? So there's a wind direction that most people need, especially if you're burning a track beside a highway, right outside of town. But that's something that'll be looked at when you call to get a burn permit. What you're burning, where you're burning, how big is it, when are you going to start, how many acres is it, how much smoke could it produce. So a lot of planning goes into it, whether it's on our end issuing the permit, and whether that planning is days, months, or maybe even a few minutes. But getting a burn permit is relatively a simple task. Just calling the local office to obtain one.
Perfect. So I know that our RC&D and Soil Conservation Service here in Emmanuel County has a burn trailer that has a lot of safety equipment on it, some of the drip torches, things like that that you can actually rent out. But what are some of the other resources that people can have that may need to burn off some land or a trash pile or something of that nature?
So we offer services to landowners too. It is a fee based service, whether it be fire breaks. We do a lot of fire breaks statewide. Whether we help the folks burn or not, we work with consultants, foresters, landowners, other government entities. But we do assist landowners burning, whether it be for site prep, understory, agriculture, and that is a fee based service that's dependent on the time. It's not an acre based fee. It's involved. It's got to do with the employees' time and the equipment that's actually utilized. But again, the local office for each county can give you a better idea about what that may cost, or they can come look at it and tell you, whether it'll be a day's project or maybe a week long project, to give a landowner a better understanding of what it may actually cost. That's going to vary depending on where it's at, what it is, and how long it's going to take.
Perfect. Well, Gabe, we certainly thank you for being part of Tilling It Like It Is today. Is there anything else that you may find beneficial for the listeners in the Southeast Georgia area?
So the only other thing I'd like to say is really just be involved. There's no shortage of resources out there, but particularly the Georgia Forestry Association. They have newsletters that they do, as well as us. But they have regional meetings. It'll be starting. I think it's 20 that they do statewide, and they're free to attend. And GFA has partnered with us, and we've partnered with them. But the main goal of those is really just to connect landowners uh, to resources that's available, and give them an update on what's being done statewide on their behalf. But those meetings are listed at gfagrow.org. You can find those meetings there under regional meetings. And then also, I did just want to say that state legislature is wrapping up, and they have been heavily involved with relief for landowners. Originally, there was about $25 million allocated for fire breaks and the forest mitigation program, uh, and the state has appropriated another significant amount of funding for that. But Senate Bill 52, it's going to allow for counties to suspend the harvest tax on the salvage timber, and it's also going to be able to reimburse counties for revenue. But that's designed to put some relief in the pockets of landowners who have already suffered a loss and are trying to harvest the timber that's there. But then the only other one I'll mention is House Bill 223. It was $200 million. It's going to allow for a refundable tax credit for cleanup and reforestation for landowners. So the main takeaways, I just want to say that Hurricane Helene was devastating. That's recognized from the local level to the national level. But I did just want to highlight some of the legislators' response and the most recent session to aim at giving relief to those landowners in the state.
Good. Well, thank you again so much for being with us today and your expertise in the forestry industry. Gabe talked a little bit about some upcoming events, which are those regional meetings. We'll certainly try to access those in our upcoming episodes and outline those in our upcoming events as we do with each episode. But we do have some more upcoming events coming to your area. So we have the Toombs, Treatland, and Montgomery County Forage Update. That is April the 25th, starting at 12 p.m. Please make sure you RSVP to the Montgomery County Extension Office if you're interested in that. One of my favorite days of the whole year is April 15th, and that is the Vidalia Onion Pack Day. So that is the legal day that our farmers can start having onions on the shelves in your grocery stores. So we're super excited about that. Make sure that you are supporting your local farmers, even if you're buying it from, the farm stand down the road or somewhere else. These guys got hit. Our onion farmers kind of got left out, but they did get hit pretty hard in the hurricane as well. So please make sure you're supporting them. We have the UGA herd sale, which is April the 22nd down in Irwinville. The heifers are looking great, so we're super excited to see those sell. On April the 22nd, we have the Livestock Emergency Response Plan. This particular event is specific to first responders and veterinarians. They can get their continued ed hours at that event, and please RSVP to the Burke County Extension Office if you're interested in attending that. And then we also have the Integrative Precision Ag Conference. That's May the 1st and 2nd down in Perry. And the deadline to register for that is April the 15th. Gabe actually just sent me a list of the most recent or the most upcoming forestry dates with those regional meetings. And it looks like the two that are going to be closest to our area in the near future is going to be April the 29th in Dublin or May the 6th in Statesboro. So please make sure you guys get registered for those. And that being said, we certainly want to remind you, if you're a peanut producer, that All About the Pod is out for the year, and they're also talking a lot about peanuts and peanut production, as well as talking cotton for you cotton producers. So certainly want to recommend you guys go heading over to their podcast as well. So again, thank you for joining us. Please let us know if there's anything we can do for you. And just remember to keep tilling it like it is.
Up beside him, Blair and beside Merle, he said there's still some good in this world. He said the hag was a